I used to believe that happiness was contagious, that if I brought joy into a room, it would spread like warmth on a cold day. I don't believe that anymore. Not since the day my own family decided my joy was the problem. It started last spring at my dad's 55th birthday dinner. That night cracked something open in me. And what poured out wasn't anger. It was clarity. But let me rewind. My name's Lena. I'm 30, a graphic designer, and for the first time in my adult life, I was in love. The kind that felt peaceful, not performative. The kind where silence didn't feel awkward. Where I didn't have to shrink myself to be lovable. His name was Jace. He's 33, a physical therapist with the kind of humor that sneaks up on you and settles in for good. We'd been dating for 8 months. He knew all my weird snack combinations, the playlist I only played when I cleaned, and the dumb way I talked to my cat. And he never made me feel like I was too much or not enough. Just me. And that was enough for him. Jace had already met my mom and stepdad. They loved him. My mom texted me 2 hours after dinner to say she hadn't seen me that happy in years. My stepdad, who treats new people like they're FBI suspects, invited him fishing the next weekend. That was his version of I like you. So I was excited to bring Jace to my dad's birthday dinner. I should have known better. See, Dad's side of the family is a different beast. There's always a storm brewing, usually around my half-sister Bree. She's 27, chronically heartbroken, and somehow always the victim. Bree has this talent for choosing men who come with flashing red flags and then acting shocked when things explode. Like the guy who lived with his ex but still shared a bed with her. Or the one who borrowed $3,000 and ghosted her. Or the married coworker who strung her along like it was his full-time job. Each time, Dad and his wife Donna would rush in like emotional paramedics. Ice cream pep talks, endless "you're too good for him" speeches. They practically built a shrine to Bree's heartbreak. And look, I've been there. I had a fiancé who decided 2 years in that commitment wasn't for him. I've cried into wine. I've slept in hoodies that didn't belong to me. But I also learned. I grew. I stopped making excuses for people who didn't choose me. Apparently that makes me dangerous. When we walked into the restaurant that night, Jace holding my hand, I thought this would be a turning point. I thought Dad and Donna would be glad I was finally with someone kind. I thought Bree, even in the middle of her latest breakup, would fake a smile and be happy for me. But the air was off. The greetings were polite, but too polished. Bree barely looked up from her drink. Donna gave Jace a lukewarm hug. Dad did his best welcome voice, but I could tell he was scanning us looking for something to disapprove of. Still, Jace was his usual charming self. Talking about his job, asking about their hobbies, laughing at my uncle's terrible jokes. He was effortless, which made things worse, I guess. About halfway through dinner, Jace started telling this sweet story about one of his elderly patients who'd recently learned to walk again after a major surgery. It was one of those stories that made you smile without realizing it. I looked over and Bree was staring at her plate like it had personally betrayed her. Then Donna said, "Must be nice, being that happy." Not "you two look good together," not "I'm glad you're doing well," just that. Her tone was off, like she was accusing me of something. I felt the shift in the room before I understood it. Bree wiped at her eyes, pretending not to cry, and suddenly I wasn't a guest at a celebration, I was the villain at someone else's pity party. I tried to pivot, asked Bree about her new job. She gave a one-word answer and went back to picking at her salad. The rest of the night was this weird performance of forced smiles and sidelong glances. Jace kept his cool, but I could tell he felt the chill too. On the drive home, he asked what that was all about. I told him about Bree's latest dating fiasco, and how maybe I'd been a little tone deaf by bringing happiness into a room where misery was trying to hold court. He said something that stuck with me. "You shouldn't have to dim your light just because someone else is sitting in the dark." I agreed. But I didn't know yet just how far my family would go to protect Bree's darkness. The next morning, Donna texted, asking if we could talk. I figured she wanted to clear the air. Instead, I got a lecture about consideration and timing and how it was inappropriate to be so visibly happy when Bree was struggling. She actually used the word flaunting. I was stunned. flaunting I'd held Jace's hand and laughed at his story. That's what qualifies as emotional insensitivity now. She suggested I scale back on showing affection around Bree. Maybe not bring Jace to family events for a while. Maybe cool it on the relationship updates. My response, I told her I wasn't going to pretend my relationship didn't exist just because Bree couldn't figure hers out. Donna said I was being selfish, that if I really cared about Bree, I'd be more mindful. That conversation rattled me for days. I kept wondering if I'd missed something, if I was somehow being cruel by existing in a happy relationship. But every time I circled back to it, I came to the same conclusion. No one should have to apologize for being happy, especially to people who claim to love them. A few weeks later, I went to my cousin's graduation party alone. Jace had to work. Bree showed up with some new guy who acted like he was moderating a TED Talk every time someone tried to make small talk. I watched her gaze at him like he was the second coming of Shakespeare while he corrected her on the difference between compliment and compliment in front of everyone. After the party, Donna pulled me aside and said, "You seemed so much more relaxed without Jace. Maybe it's best if you come solo to family stuff for a while." And that was it. The moment I knew this wasn't about consideration, it was about control. I told her no. I wasn't going to hide my partner like he was some dirty secret just because Bree couldn't handle seeing what a healthy relationship looked like. She accused me of being jealous of the attention Bree got. I laughed, jealous of being pitied. No thanks. By the time I got home that night, I knew things had changed permanently. I didn't know how much yet, but the line had been drawn. And for once, I wasn't the one holding the eraser. I thought refusing to play along would cause a stir, maybe spark a cold shoulder or two. I didn't expect full-on exile, but that's exactly what happened. A few days after that graduation party, I got a call from my dad. His voice was calm, rehearsed, almost like he was reading from a script he and Donna had drafted over coffee. He said things between me and the family had become tense, that he'd given it a lot of thought, and maybe some space would help ease the tension. I asked him straight out if I was being disinvited from family gatherings. He hesitated. That pause told me everything. Then he said, "It's not about exclusion, Lena. It's about emotional balance." Emotional balance. Like my presence was tipping the whole family into chaos. I wanted to laugh. Instead, I said, "So I'm not welcome until I stop being happy." He insisted that wasn't it. He said I'd been insensitive to Bree's situation, that my behavior had become disruptive. I pointed out that I hadn't done anything except show up with my boyfriend and smile through dinner. He didn't deny it. He just said that actions have consequences. So I stopped showing up. Not out of shame, out of protest. And silence fell. No calls, no texts. Nothing but the occasional vague complaint from Bree about her latest relationship disaster still landing in my inbox like we hadn't just erased decades of sisterhood over one dinner. I didn't respond. I couldn't. It all felt too fake. Like I was being baited into pretending none of this had happened, into slipping back into the version of me that tiptoed around Bree's feelings, edited myself into someone quieter, less content. That version of me was gone. Jace, of course, was furious. He couldn't believe they'd cut me out like that. He said, "You're not the problem, Lena. You just stopped accepting their dysfunction." He wasn't wrong. And if I'm honest, I felt more peace in that silence than I expected. For the first time in years, I wasn't worrying about how to manage other people's emotions. I didn't have to sanitize my happiness or make sure Bree didn't feel threatened by my life. I was just living free. Then came the proposal. We were at our favorite little Italian place. Warm bread, candlelight, the kind of night where time feels soft. Jace reached into his coat and pulled out a ring that looked like it belonged on my hand all along. He asked if I wanted to spend the rest of my life with him, building a life full of joy, curiosity, and quiet Sunday mornings. I said yes before he finished the sentence. It was beautiful, simple, exactly right. And almost immediately the joy was tainted by the dread of telling my dad. I could already hear the reaction. Not excitement, not congratulations, Just more guilt, more reasons why my happiness was inconvenient for everyone else. But this was my life, our life, and I wasn't going to shrink it to fit their comfort zone. So I called my mom first. Her reaction made me cry in the best way. She was overjoyed. She asked to see the ring over video call, squealed, and immediately started talking about dresses and flowers. She didn't ask about Bree, didn't make it about anyone else. She just celebrated with me, no conditions. I called my best friend next. She's the one who introduced me to Jace, and she screamed so loudly I had to hold the phone away from my ear. She said she'd been waiting for this call for months. I asked her to be my maid of honor. She said yes through tears, telling my dad that I postponed for days. I kept drafting messages and deleting them. Eventually, I picked up the phone and told myself to just get it over with. He answered like everything was fine, like we hadn't spoken in weeks. I told him about the engagement, about how happy I was, and he responded like I'd told him I got a new car. Flat, distant. Then, as expected, he shifted the conversation toward logistics, dates, venues, budget. Not a single word about how he felt. Just spreadsheets and tension. Then he said the line I'll never forget. You might want to consider waiting until things settle with Bree. It's been a rough time for her. I almost dropped the phone. I said, "You're suggesting I postpone my wedding for Bree." He said I was overreacting, that it wasn't about choosing sides, that it was about keeping the family dynamic smooth. That was the moment I knew there was no fixing this. Not by playing nice, not by waiting it out. My happiness was always going to be treated like a threat. So I told him plainly, if you can't be happy for me, that's your choice. But I'm not waiting for Bree's life to stabilize before living mine. He accused me of being selfish, said I was rushing, that I wasn't thinking about the bigger picture. I asked him what the bigger picture was supposed to be, me dimming myself until Bree finally stopped spiraling. He didn't answer that, just said we'd talk later and hung up. Later never came. I told Jace everything. He pulled me close and said, "We're still having the wedding of your dreams, with or without them." And we did. Planning became a joy again. I called my mom, my best friend, our closest people. We found a vineyard just outside the city, sun-drenched, simple, perfect. We kept it small, intentional. The only people invited were the ones who had ever made us feel safe, loved, and celebrated. I mailed the invites out, knowing full well that my dad and Donna might not even open theirs. And when they didn't RSVP, it wasn't a surprise. It was just confirmation. What hurt more was what followed. A week before the wedding, I got a message from Donna. She said she hoped I realized the damage I was doing by going through with the wedding without repairing the rift in our family. She said Bree had seen our engagement photos online and cried for hours. That it was cruel of me to parade my joy when I knew how fragile Bree was. Cruel for existing in love. That word clung to me like smoke. I reread the message 10 times before I finally responded. I said, "You chose not to be part of this. I didn't exclude you. You excluded yourselves. I'm not responsible for Bree's emotional stability, and I will not apologize for being happy." She didn't reply, but the silence was its own answer. I looked at Jace that night and said, "Let's build a life so full of joy that no one can guilt us into dimming it." He smiled and said, "Already ahead of you." And just like that, we moved forward. Not away, just forward. Our wedding day wasn't supposed to feel like a statement, but it did. Not because we planned it that way, but because their absence spoke louder than any speech ever could. We kept the ceremony small. Barefoot in the grass kind of small. Just under 30 people, all of them, the ones who had never once made me question if my happiness was inconvenient. My mom walked me down the aisle. She was radiant, beaming like her heart was too full to hold inside. I caught her wiping tears before the music even started. And when she looked at me, I didn't see sadness for the people who weren't there. I saw pride, fierce, glowing pride. The kind that made my chest ache in the best way. Jace was standing at the front looking at me like the world had just aligned. And when I got to him, everything fell quiet in my head. No noise, no worry, just that feeling you get when something finally clicks into place. The vows we wrote were simple, honest. We promised to choose each other, to protect the joy we'd found, to never let anyone convince us it needed to be hidden. As I looked into his eyes, I felt this wave of peace. Not the fairy tale kind, the earned kind. The kind that comes after everything you've lost teaches you what love really looks like. When it was over and people started clapping, I realized my hands were shaking, not from nerves, but from relief. I'd made it. Through the silence, the guilt, the emotional gymnastics. I was here, married, happy, free. The reception felt like exhaling after holding my breath for months. Laughter that didn't feel forced, toasts that didn't walk on eggshells. My best friend gave a speech that had everyone laughing through tears. She said I'd taught her that love didn't have to be chaotic to be passionate, and that stability wasn't boring, it was brave. My mom followed, and her words nearly broke me. She said watching me grow into a woman who knew her worth was the greatest gift she'd ever been given. And when she said Jace was the partner I'd always deserved, I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep it together. There was no drama, no sideways glances, no tension crawling under the surface. Just music wine and the kind of joy that doesn't need permission to exist. That night, as Jace and I lay tangled together in the hotel suite, still dressed and too full of cake to sleep, he looked at me and whispered, "We did it." I smiled and said, "Yeah." And we didn't need anyone's approval to make it real. It should have ended there. It didn't. The real fallout came after the honeymoon. We'd barely unpacked when my phone started buzzing. First, it was Donna, then my dad, then Bree. Messages, missed calls, guilt bombs dressed as concern. Donna said she was hurt that we hadn't tried harder to include them, that seeing the wedding photos online had devastated Bree, that we'd been cruel for celebrating without mending fences. I didn't answer. I didn't trust myself to. But the implication was clear: my marriage wasn't the offense. My happiness was. They still believed I'd cut them out to be spiteful, not because they told me plainly and repeatedly that my joy made things harder for Bree. And now they wanted to rewrite the narrative, position themselves as the abandoned ones, the victims of my boundary setting. When I finally responded, I kept it short. I said I invited you. You declined. I made no effort to exclude anyone, but I also refused to delay my life waiting for permission to be happy. Donna wrote back almost immediately. She said I'd changed, that I was cold now, that the Lena she used to know wouldn't have put her own desires above her family. I sat with that for a long time, because she wasn't wrong. I had changed. I was done setting myself on fire to keep others warm. I was done shrinking. And the old me. She wasn't coming back. My dad called a few days later. He didn't apologize. Instead, he said we needed to talk things out like adults and repair the damage before it became permanent. I told him the only damage I saw was the years spent prioritizing Bree's comfort over everyone else's. He didn't like that. He said I was being dramatic, that family meant putting others first even when it's hard. I asked him if that same rule ever applied to Bree, if she was ever told to consider someone else's feelings before making a mess of her life. He got quiet. Then he said, "She's fragile." I said, "And what am I? Disposable silence?" That was our real dynamic in one sentence. Bree was the center. I was the support beam, useful, invisible, expected to carry weight without breaking. And now that I'd stepped out of that role, the whole structure was shaking. A week later, a friend of the family reached out, said she'd seen some posts Bree had made on social media. Vague, moody captions. Wedding photos from ours reshared with crying emojis and captions about being left behind. She was trying to rewrite the story, paint herself as the sister who got abandoned while I danced in white and forgot where I came from. The irony, I hadn't forgotten anything. I remembered too much. Every birthday where Bree's crisis overshadowed my joy. Every family dinner where I was told to be more understanding. Every time I was expected to listen, support, and stay small. The difference now was that I wasn't playing along anymore, and that apparently made me the villain. Jace watched it all unfold with this mix of rage and disbelief. He kept asking, how do they not see it? I didn't have an answer. Maybe they didn't want to. Maybe they couldn't. Either way, I wasn't going to waste another ounce of energy proving I wasn't the bad guy. Because I wasn't. I'd bent myself backward for years. Always the peacekeeper. Always the one who softened my voice and bit my tongue. But here's the truth. Peace isn't real if you have to silence yourself to keep it. And I was done being quiet. I didn't block them. Not yet. But I stopped responding. No more guilt text replies. No more rehearsed explanations. I chose stillness, space, healing, and for the first time it felt like breathing clean air. Meanwhile, Bree continued her pattern. She jumped into a new relationship. A guy from her gym who looked like he modeled part-time and talked like he thought women were accessories. My cousin sent me screenshots of Bree gushing about him online. Finally found someone who gets me, she wrote. 2 weeks later, she posted a black square with a broken heart emoji. Same story, different face. I wasn't even surprised anymore. But what did surprise me was the next phone call I got. My dad. Again. Only this time his voice was different. Heavy, shaken. He said Bree's in the hospital. She tried to overdose. My heart dropped. All the breath left my lungs. I couldn't even move. The rest of his words blurred. Pills, note, doctors, stable for now. Then he said something that made my skin go cold. She asked to see you. And just like that, everything shifted again. Driving to the hospital, my mind was a swirl of confusion and grief. I couldn't shake the feeling that something about this didn't add up. Bree had asked for me. Me. The sister who supposedly ruined everything just by being happy. I didn't know what to expect. An apology. A breakdown, more blame. Every worst-case scenario ran laps through my head. I parked without even remembering the turns I'd taken to get there. The hospital lobby felt like a blur of antiseptic light and faint beeping sounds. I asked for her room, signed in, and followed a nurse who walked too fast and said too little. When I stepped in, Bree looked small. Not just physically, but like her whole energy had deflated. Her skin was pale, her eyes swollen. And when she saw me, she started crying immediately, not loud, but this silent, steady stream of tears that made my throat close up. I sat down in the chair beside her bed. We didn't say anything at first. The silence stretched between us like thread pulled tight. Then she whispered, "I'm sorry." Just that. 2 words, quiet, cracked. I swallowed hard and said, "I'm glad you're okay." It wasn't everything I wanted to say, but it was honest. She wiped her eyes and looked at me. "I didn't know what else to do," she said. It felt like I was drowning and nobody could see me. My heart broke. I hated that she had gotten to this point, that she'd carried so much hurt she couldn't hold it anymore. "You could have called me," I said softly. "I would have picked up." She nodded but didn't speak for a minute. Then she said something that made everything shift. "Karen told me you laughed about me, that you said I was pathetic, that Jace made fun of my dating history and you agreed with him." My stomach dropped. "What?" She nodded, again, eyes searching mine for some kind of confirmation, some sign that the betrayal she'd believed in was real. "She said she overheard you two talking at that restaurant before the wedding. She said you joked about me being desperate, that you said I embarrass the family." My chest felt tight. I couldn't even breathe for a second. "Bree, that never happened. I would never say those things about you. Ever." She stared at me, her face contorted with hurt and confusion. "But Karen was so sure. She made it sound like you'd been pretending to support me when really you were just waiting for me to fall apart again." I shook my head. She lied. I don't know why. Maybe to keep control of the situation. Maybe because she needed a reason to justify shutting me out. But I promise you none of that is true. I've always wanted you to be okay. Even when I was frustrated. Even when I didn't know how to help. Bree looked down at her blanket. It felt true, though. Seeing your wedding pictures. You looked so perfect. And I just felt like a disaster. I reached over and took her hand. I'm not perfect. Jace and I worked to build something real. We struggled too. But none of that means your life is less valuable. You've been through hell, Bree. And I'm sorry if I didn't make enough space for that. We talked for over an hour about the guilt, the jealousy, the weight of always being compared, even if no one said it out loud. She said it wasn't just my happiness that hurt, it was the idea that she might never get there. That she might always be the mess, the one everyone pitied but never truly respected. I told her that I'd never wanted her to feel like that I never wanted to be the reason she doubted herself. She believed me. I could see it in her eyes. That conversation didn't magically fix everything, but it cracked something open. A doorway neither of us had been willing or able to step through before. When I left her room, I felt lighter, like maybe there was a future for us after all. But the hallway outside was waiting with a different kind of storm. Karen was there, arms folded, eyes hard. "So, you told her I'm a liar," she said, voice low and sharp. I didn't flinch. I told her the truth. That I never said those things about her. Because I didn't. Karen scoffed. She misunderstood. "I never said you laughed at her. I said you were concerned." Maybe she twisted it in her head? "No," I said firmly. She was clear. "And if she twisted anything, it's because you planted the seed." Karen's face shifted. For a second, I thought she might explode, but instead she smiled tight and cold. "You always have to be the hero, don't you? Even now, turning this whole thing into your redemption arc." I stared at her, suddenly exhausted. "I'm not interested in being a hero. I just want to stop being your scapegoat." Her expression didn't change. Bree needed someone to blame for how she was feeling. I gave her one. "You were already halfway out the door anyway. You weaponized her pain," I said, "and you didn't care what it did to either of us." "I protected her," she snapped. "From what?" "From feeling less than." I stepped closer. "You think shielding her from discomfort is kindness? It's not. It's control. And it's destroying her." Karen looked at me like she didn't recognize me anymore. "You've changed," she said again. This time it didn't feel like an insult. It felt like the truth. I said, "and I'm not going back." I walked away before she could respond. My dad called later that night. He sounded drained, said he'd spoken with Bree and that she seemed clearer now, calmer. She said she wants to try therapy seriously this time, he said. She wants to do better. "That's good," I said. "She deserves to feel whole." There was a pause, then he said, "She also said you didn't say those things, that she knows now Karen was trying to protect her in her own way." I almost laughed. "That's one way to frame it." He sighed. "I don't want this family to fall apart." "Then maybe you should stop enabling the person pulling it apart," I said. "She's your wife," he said, almost like a defense. "And Bree is your daughter, but I'm also your daughter, and I won't keep sacrificing my peace to protect people who won't take responsibility." Silence. "Then I'll think about what you said." That was the closest he'd come to admitting fault. And maybe it wasn't enough. But it was more than I'd expected. Over the next few weeks, Bree stayed in the hospital for a while longer. We kept texting, sometimes short check-ins, sometimes longer messages where she unpacked years of feelings she'd never said out loud. I listened. I supported. But I didn't let myself fall back into the role of fixer. I'd learned that lesson the hard way. Bree needed to find her own healing. I could be a witness to it, but I couldn't carry her there. Jace stood by me through all of it. Every late-night conversation, every emotional whiplash. And one night, as we lay on the couch under a blanket, he looked at me and said, "You did the right thing. You stayed kind. But you stayed honest, too. That's rare." I didn't reply, just kissed his hand and held on a little tighter, because I knew we weren't done. The story wasn't over. But for the first time, it wasn't just survival. It was movement, change, and maybe, just maybe, the beginning of something healthier for all of us. Life didn't just go back to normal after that hospital visit. I guess I hadn't really expected it to, but a small part of me hoped that maybe finally things would shift for the better. Bree was trying. That was real. She'd started therapy, stuck with it, even talked about maybe joining a support group. Her texts were different now, less crisis, more reflection. She didn't expect me to fix anything anymore. She just wanted someone who listened, and I could do that. I wanted to do that. But with my dad and Karen, it was like a silent standoff had settled over everything. There were no more direct fights, but there also weren't any apologies. Just this weird emotional freeze where nobody knew what to say without digging up the past. I stopped reaching out. I didn't block them, didn't make any grand declarations. I just let things be. If they wanted to rebuild something real, they could call. But I wasn't going to keep knocking on a door that only opened when they wanted to criticize me. Meanwhile, my life with Jace kept growing in all the ways I'd dreamed of. We painted our guest room sunny yellow one Saturday, laughing at how bad we both were with painter's tape. We started hosting little dinners with friends, played trivia on Tuesday nights, planted basil that immediately died, and replaced it with a succulent we named Max because it was the only plant we hadn't killed. It was simple and real and peaceful in a way I'd never experienced in my family home. I used to think peace was boring. Turns out it's the best kind of freedom. My mom noticed it too. She said I looked lighter, happier. I told her I felt like I could breathe now without waiting for the next emotional ambush. "That's what letting go of dysfunction does," she said, sipping her tea. "It doesn't mean you don't love them. It just means you're choosing to love yourself too." But it wasn't always easy. Sometimes I missed my dad in that aching, quiet way where I'd suddenly remember a childhood moment, him pushing me on the swing at the park, his voice reading bedtime stories the way he used to hum old songs in the car. I missed those versions of him, the soft ones, the ones before everything became so tangled and conditional. One afternoon, about 2 months after Bree was released, my dad called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. He sounded tired, not angry, just worn. He said he wanted to see me. Just the two of us. I agreed, mostly because I needed to know if there was anything left between us that could be salvaged. We met at a quiet little diner halfway between our houses. He looked older. Maybe it was just the lighting, or maybe I was seeing him without the haze of childhood expectations. We made small talk for a few minutes, weather work, how Bree was doing. Then he cleared his throat and looked me in the eye. "I've been thinking a lot," he said. "About what you said. About how we handled things. About you." I didn't say anything. I waited. "I was wrong," he finally said. "About a lot of it. I let Karen control too much. I let her version of support become the family's entire way of doing things." My heart beat faster. "Why?" He sighed. "Because it was easier. She made decisions, took charge, and I convinced myself that keeping the peace meant agreeing with her, even when it hurt you." "It did hurt," I said quietly. "I know, and I see that now. I see how I let one daughter's crisis become the reason I pushed the other away." His voice cracked. "You didn't deserve that." I blinked fast. I wasn't expecting that level of honesty. I wasn't expecting to believe it. "What about Karen?" I asked. "Does she feel the same?" He looked down at his coffee. "I don't know. She doesn't like being wrong. She thinks you twisted things, made her look like the bad guy." I laughed a little, but there was no humor in it. She did that herself. "I know," he said again. "I'm not here to make excuses for her. I wanted you to know I see you. And I'm sorry. I didn't realize how badly I'd needed to hear that until I was actually hearing it. The apology didn't fix everything, but it mattered. I told him I appreciated it, that it didn't erase the pain, but it made space for healing. We sat there for a long time after that, mostly quiet. And for the first time in what felt like years, it didn't feel awkward. It felt like maybe underneath all the resentment and silence, we still had something left to rebuild. After that meeting, things didn't magically go back to how they were, but they shifted. He texted more, called sometimes, asked about my life without immediately turning the conversation back to Bree. He didn't always say the right thing, but at least he was showing up. Karen stayed distant, which honestly was a relief. Bree, on the other hand, was starting to grow in ways that made me proud. She told me her therapist was helping her unlearn patterns she didn't even realize she'd internalized. She'd stopped dating entirely for a while, was taking a ceramics class, volunteering at an animal shelter. It wasn't a straight line to healing, but it was movement. And it felt like the first time she wasn't just reacting to pain, but actively choosing herself. She even apologized again this time without tears or guilt or fear, just honesty. "I blamed you for things that weren't your fault," she said during one of our long phone calls, because it was easier than looking at myself. "I'm sorry. You don't have to keep apologizing," I said. "You're doing the work. That's what matters." "I want to be someone who can cheer for you," she said, "not someone who needs you to shrink so I can feel better." That line stayed with me, maybe forever, because for so long I'd felt like my brightness made people squint, like I had to dim my light just to keep the peace. But here was my sister, the one who'd once asked me not to be too happy, telling me she wanted to be strong enough to handle the light. That was real change, and it gave me hope. Hope that maybe we could grow separately and still come back together. Not out of obligation or guilt, but because we chose to. Jace asked me one night if I thought I'd ever fully forgive my dad. I said I didn't know. But I don't need to have an answer yet, I told him. Forgiveness isn't a finish line. It's a choice you make over and over until it stops hurting. He kissed my forehead. "Then you're already halfway there." I smiled. Maybe I was. Maybe, just maybe, healing wasn't about pretending the pain never happened, but choosing not to live under its shadow anymore. Time has a strange way of softening the sharp edges. It doesn't erase anything, but it gives you space to breathe, to reflect, to stop flinching every time you hear a familiar ringtone. A year after the wedding, I was sitting on the back porch with Jace watching the sky melt into dusk when I realized I hadn't thought about Karen in weeks. Not in anger, not with guilt, just not at all. It hit me quietly, the way healing often does. Like noticing a wound doesn't sting anymore, or that you haven't had to explain your pain to anyone in a while. I wasn't bitter. I was just done. Not in a dramatic, door-slamming kind of way, just peacefully finished with people who didn't know how to love without conditions. My relationship with Bree had found a new rhythm. We weren't best friends, but we weren't walking on eggshells anymore either. She'd stayed in therapy. She had boundaries, now real ones. She still texted me about her life, but there was no sense of urgency, no expectation that I fix things. We met for brunch once a month, and those mornings had become something I looked forward to. We laughed again, really laughed. Not the strained kind where you're pretending everything is fine, but the kind where you're fully present. There was a lightness between us that hadn't existed in years. One morning, over pancakes and coffee, Bree told me she was thinking about going back to school. Not for a man, not for anyone, she said. Just because I want to feel proud of something I did on my own. I smiled so hard my cheeks ached. That's the best reason. And it really was. Watching her rebuild herself from the inside out taught me something I hadn't expected. Compassion doesn't mean sacrifice. You can care deeply for someone and still refuse to carry their burdens. You can offer love without offering your peace as payment. My dad stayed in the picture, though, at a respectful distance. We met for coffee once every couple of months. He asked about Jace, about my work, about life. He was still learning how to show up without making excuses for the past. Sometimes he stumbled, but he kept showing up. That mattered. He never brought Karen to those meetups. I never asked why. Some things are better left unspoken. Jace, meanwhile, continued to be the calm in every storm. He didn't rescue me, he stood beside me while I rescued myself. That's the difference. Real love doesn't erase pain. It gives you the strength to face it. We adopted a second dog, a quiet little mutt named Luna, who followed Charlie around like a shadow. Our weekends filled with farmers markets, movie marathons, and hikes that ended in muddy shoes and aching legs. We weren't chasing happiness. We were building it. One quiet, ordinary day at a time. I started writing again, too. Not just journaling, but real writing. Short essays, personal pieces. One of them went viral. It was about boundaries, about learning to say no without apologizing, about choosing peace over approval. I didn't name names. I didn't need to. But the people who needed it most found their own reflections in it. One email stood out. It was from a woman who said she'd read my story while crying in her car after yet another fight with her family. You helped me realize, she wrote, that I don't have to break myself into pieces just to keep everyone else whole. I saved that email, reread it whenever I felt the old guilt creeping in. Because there will always be moments when that old version of yourself whispers that maybe you were the problem, that you should have tried harder, stayed quieter, dimmed your light just a little more. But I've learned to silence that voice with a simple truth. You are not responsible for other people's inability to handle your joy. And that truth has become the foundation of my peace. The last time I saw Karen was at a family event hosted by one of my cousins. Jace came with me, of course. I wasn't going to pretend he didn't exist just to make someone else more comfortable. We walked in hand, and I felt that familiar flicker of tension when I saw her across the room. She didn't approach me. I didn't approach her. But there was no malice in it, just detachment. Like two people who once tried to live in each other's orbit and realized they were never meant to. Bree hugged me tightly and introduced me to her new boyfriend, a kind-eyed guy who worked at the university library and brought her a new book every week. He seemed grounded, quiet in the way that said he listened more than he talked. I liked him instantly. My dad was there too. He shook Jace's hand, asked about our garden, told a dumb joke that made everyone groan. It was the first family gathering in years that didn't leave me feeling hollow afterward. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I wasn't waiting to be accepted. I just was, and that was enough. On the drive home, Jace looked over and said, "You're not carrying it anymore, are you? Carrying what I asked even though I knew. The weight of proving you deserve love. The need to explain why you're happy." I shook my head. "No, I put that down a while ago." He reached over and squeezed my hand. "I'm proud of you." I smiled, tears burning the corners of my eyes. I'm proud of me too, because I had made it through. Not just the wedding drama or the endless arguments or the years of walking on eggshells, but through the deeper battle of learning to love myself in a world that kept asking me to shrink. I chose myself, again and again, and in doing so, I made room for better love, real connection, and a future built on truth instead of guilt. That's not to say everything is perfect now. I still get the occasional text from my dad that feels like a veiled request for validation. Bree still slips into old patterns when she's stressed. And sometimes, in the quiet moments, I wonder what might have been if our family had learned how to love without control, without conditions. But then I look around at the life Jace and I have built, the laughter that echoes through our kitchen, the warmth of our little home, the calm I feel when I wake up beside someone who sees me clearly and loves me anyway. And I know this is what healing looks like. It's not loud. It's not perfect. It's not flashy or dramatic. It's waking up one morning and realizing that the chaos no longer owns you, that you can exist in your full light without apology, that you are allowed to be happy even if someone else isn't ready to be. That's the legacy I want. Not bitterness, not revenge, just freedom. Quiet, steady, earned freedom. And if that makes someone uncomfortable, that's not my burden to carry anymore. I'm done dimming. I'm done shrinking. I'm done apologizing for joy. From now on, I live in the light, and I bring only those who know how to stand beside me without asking me to cast a shadow. Story 2. After moving in with me, my brother became domineering. I fled my flat after he struck me in the face when I told him I wanted to live someplace else. When my brother was 6 and I was about 10, our parents divorced. It was a messy divorce. Mom sobbed herself to sleep, Dad stayed up all night, and there were a lot of yelling battles. You know the typical childhood trauma. In no way was our father physically abusive. My mom never had hard evidence, but it seemed likely that she was cheating and emotionally tuned out. Dad started a new life after the divorce by relocating to a city roughly 2 hours away. Initially, Dad would invite us over for a few weekends, but with time, the frequency of those trips decreased until they only occurred on holidays a few times a year. My brother and I spent a lot of time alone together because my mom worked 2 jobs to support us. For him, I essentially became a second parent. I cook basic meals for him when Mom works late, make sure he completes his schoolwork, and watch out for him in general. We formed a close relationship that is uncommon among siblings. He viewed me as a sister and somewhat of a father figure, and I was constantly protective of him. We leaned heavily on one another emotionally because our mom was physically present more often than our dad, although she was frequently worn out or anxious about money. I attended college 4 hours away from our hometown in a different state after high school. It was a far better school than anything close to home, and I received a partial scholarship. My departure caused my brother a great deal of distress. Although I felt awful for him, I also felt that he was acting a little irrationally. He didn't want to be alone, but it didn't mean I was going to stay in our shabby hometown. He had friends and other things, and our mother was still there. I said, I will give you a call and come over whenever I could. I would return home around once a month, generally, for a weekend throughout the first year I was away. In addition to having lengthy phone conversations at least once a week, my brother and I would communicate nearly every day. The visits decreased in frequency throughout my sophomore year, perhaps to once every 2 months. I was participating in college events, making friends, and to be honest, the drive was wearing me out. My brother appeared to comprehend. Or he didn't whine too much anyhow. I was only returning home for certain holidays, and perhaps a week or 2 during summer break during my junior year. I was unable to spend the entire summer at home like I used to because of internships and summer school. After a few years, my brother received his high school diploma. He asked if he could move in with me instead of immediately attending college. It seemed reasonable to me. Our town is small and uninteresting. About 12,000 people live there. Months after a film's release, one theater continues to screen it. 3 fast food chains. You saw the image. Additionally, there are many more opportunities in the location where I moved. Because I was living in a studio apartment at the time, I had a respectable circle of friends, had become used to my surroundings, and had developed a routine. I informed him that when my lease expired in 3 months, we would have to locate a larger space. We eventually moved in together after finding a respectable 2-bedroom apartment that we could afford, right before the start of my autumn semester. But very soon, things became strange. At first, I failed to see the warning signs. He appeared to be rather engaged in my social life for starters. They kept asking me where I was going and who I was hanging out with when I got home. Since he was new to the city, I originally assumed it was simply him attempting to make friends with me. He would hardly chat and usually appeared uneasy when I asked him to hang out with my friends. Later, they would remark that they were obnoxious, phony, or whatever. He lost his mind when he discovered that I had been having casual relationships with certain males. He pretended to be upset that I hadn't told him, claiming that we were becoming so distant that I wouldn't even discuss my dating life with him. He then requested that I refrain from inviting any men to our flat. He just stated that it made him uneasy when I questioned why. I informed him that although I could accept it if we were only dating casually, I would most certainly want to invite my boyfriend over if we started dating. He just stated that whatever the situation, we would deal with it when it arises. I made an effort to let him know that this was a somewhat irrational request, as if both of us are grown-ups who pay the rent for this home. Why shouldn't I be allowed to have visitors? He insisted that it was different since I was dating males and not simply buddies. He would get evasive and say things like, "I just don't like the idea of it," or I shouldn't have to explain why it makes me uncomfortable when I pressed him for a concrete explanation. Since I wasn't actually dating someone at the time, I finally broke it off. It was all right for a time. He made some acquaintances at work, obtained a job at a coffee shop close to our flat, and appeared to be settling into city life. Most nights, we would have supper together and play video games or watch movies. It was almost like we were kids again, and I began to wonder whether I had overreacted to dating in general. I then began dating this man from one of my classes around 4 months after he moved in. Jake was his name, and he was a really kind man. After a few weeks of dating, I wanted to invite him over to my house since we clicked so quickly. Fortunately, Jake never inquired why we constantly hung out at his apartment rather than mine. However, I felt that it was time to discuss it with my brother. My brother essentially declared, "College guys only want sex and I should be focusing on school," during our heated argument. It was unbelievable to me that this was taking place. "I'm a fucking adult and can make my own decisions," I reminded him. I made it known that I could balance everything by maintaining a 3.8 GPA while yet having a social life. He retorted that he should have a voice in what occurs in his house because he pays half the rent. In addition, he said that I was being naive and that Jake was most likely sleeping with other ladies. I worried he may destroy something at one point since the battle grew so hot. His face was hot, and he was pacing while tightening his hands. He's never been so furious in my life. I was a little afraid, but I refused to back down. Eventually, we made a compromise. Jake was welcome to visit, but he was not allowed to spend the night. I informed him that while this would work for the time being, we would need to go over it again later. Once more, use the, "When the time comes, we'll deal with that issue." Bullshit. After that, there was tension for several days. We hardly exchanged words, only nodding briefly as we passed in the corridor. There was undoubtedly tension present, but eventually we sort of settled back into our pattern. My brother was coldly courteous to Jake when I brought him around a couple of times. Not much more. Usually he would leave the apartment or find an excuse to retire to his room, while Jake was present. God forbid Jake stays until 11 p.m., so over the course of the following several months, they had this identical, pointless debate around 3 times. I informed my brother that I wouldn't renew our lease when it came up in 4 months if he couldn't stop acting strangely about it, or put his arm around me when we were watching TV. Despite his repeated apologies, he insisted he was correct. As if he had any power over me, he claimed he would let me make my own errors. A few weeks later, for very different reasons, the boyfriend and I called it quits. Since we had only been dating for a few months, we concluded that long distance wasn't worth it when Jake accepted an internship offer in a different state. Taking full advantage of this, my brother told me that I should have listened to him and that he was correct all along. He pretended that the split was evidence of Jake's abuse of me or something, despite the fact that it was a friendly, reciprocal separation. I informed my mother over the phone about my brother's strange behavior about my dating life. Given that our father hasn't been around much since the divorce, she suggested he was most likely attempting to replace him. Even if that is the case, it doesn't lessen how badly he is acting. Mom stated he will get over it and advised me to be patient with him. But I wasn't shocked because she's usually defending him. For a time, not much happened during this era. Perhaps since I was single, my brother appeared to relax a little. We settled into a cozy pattern. He would work at the coffee shop in the mornings. I would be in class. After that, both of us would spend the evenings at home. We would occasionally cook together. At other times, we work independently. It was nearly like usual. After that, I spent a weekend away from town attending a friend's wedding. The wedding went well. Nothing noteworthy. The night's high point came when the bride's cousin got really inebriated and fell into the cake. In any case, several of my belongings were gone when I returned. My go-to scent. My friend gave me a pricey one for my birthday. Some clothing, such as an expensive lotion from this high-end brand, and a sweatshirt that I truly enjoyed. When I questioned my brother about it, he said that his friends must have taken it because he had invited them over. He promised to take care of everything and return my belongings. He had let people into my room while I was away, and I was really upset about it. He said he was sorry and that it wouldn't happen again. After a week or so, he did return everything, but something didn't feel right. He seemed completely unconcerned that his buddy had allegedly stolen from me. And when I questioned which buddies were responsible, he became evasive and shifted the topic. Even now, I don't think it was his pals. After that, maybe a month ago, or maybe longer, I started locking my bedroom door whenever I left the apartment. I can't recall precisely. He wanted me to meet his girlfriend, he informed me. For a moment, I thought about being like a dick about it, as if he had dated my ex, but I chose to be the grown-up and say it would be fantastic instead. He made a huge deal out of it, asked me to dress up, prepared a fancy dinner with several dishes, and planned the evening. To be honest, I was glad he had someone else to concentrate on instead of me. But holy crap, it was like staring into a mirror when she finally appeared. We looked so similar that I knew she was as frightened out as I was. Our physique types are similar, and we both have platinum blonde hair, pale complexion, and green eyes. Additionally, our heights are comparable. We discovered we had even more in common after supper. She has the same major as me but attends a different local college. It's strange because we share similar tastes in music and even manners. She even had an obscure novel that was one of my favorite books. I doubted many people had read it. The entire situation seemed unnerving. My brother feigned not to notice the parallels, or at least didn't seem to. As I sat there trying not to show how freaked out I was, he continued to gush about how rare and unusual she was. Although she gave off the impression of being kind, I could see she was also uncomfortable. "Are you seeing this was the expression she kept giving me?" As long as my brother wasn't distracted. I asked my brother whether he had noticed how much she and I looked alike after she had departed. "I was being strange," he said, rolling his eyes. In any case, he now often invites her over and they make out on the living room couch. He said I was envious because he wasn't making out with me when I asked if they could take it to his bedroom. Really, what the fuck? When he stated it, his partner seemed really perplexed, and to be honest, so did I. By showing her off, he seems to be attempting to arouse my jealousy. When his girlfriend was around, I saw that she was looking at me a few times as if she was trying to figure something out. "My brother has always been this intense," so she muttered once when he went to the restroom. I simply nodded as I was at a loss for words. She appeared to want to say more, but my brother returned. If he hadn't been acting so oddly ever since we moved in together, I wouldn't give it any thought. I'm not sure if I'm dreaming or not. Given that we live together, I don't want to assume my younger brother has some strange attraction on me. However, I'm not sure how to discuss it with him without his brushing me off as insane envious or whatever. I began to spend more time outside of the apartment. Instead of studying at home, I would go to the library. I tried to avoid being alone with my brother in general, made up excuses, and slept at friends' houses whenever I could. Naturally, he noticed and kept texting me to find out where I was when I would be home, etc. If I didn't answer immediately away, he would phone until I did. My phone died one evening when I was out with some pals. My brother was waiting for me in the dim living room when I arrived home at approximately midnight. He began shouting about how anxious he had been and how careless and disrespectful I was. He refused to listen when I attempted to explain about my phone. He responded, "You think you can just do whatever you want," after grabbing my arm so firmly that it was bruised. "You believe that no one has to answer to you." After yanking my arm away, I spent the remainder of the night isolated in my room. He pretended nothing had happened the following day. He prepared breakfast and was happy as if it were any other day. I attempted to explain to him that it wasn't acceptable for him to grasp me in that way while I was still disturbed up, but he brushed it off. "I didn't really touch you." "Stop exaggerating," he said. I began preparing to move away after that episode. I got back in touch with a female who had expressed the need for a roommate in one of my classes. She appeared normal, and we had a good relationship. Together, we began to quietly explore several locations. I wanted to wait until I had everything arranged before telling my brother that I was leaving. I eventually made the decision to inform him yesterday that I would not be renewing our lease. In the hopes that he wouldn't flip out with his girlfriend around, I thought I'd inform him when she was gone, just in case. I filled a backpack with necessities and valuables in case I had to depart right away. I put my phone in my pocket to capture audio and made sure it was fully charged. He went to the kitchen for some snacks as they were watching movies in the living room. "We need to chat," I murmured as I walked up to him. Though irritated, he concurred. I informed him that I wouldn't be renewing the lease for another month since I didn't think we would get along as roommates. I told him that I wanted to live somewhere where I could choose who came over since I felt like he didn't respect me as a roommate. A roommate who would be concerned if their friend stole from me was something else, I said. His girlfriend came in to see how we were doing since he started becoming louder and more irate. He assured her that she should probably go and that everything was okay. I attempted to remain calm and reply, "No, don't let me ruin your evening," in a panic. "Stay, please. I'm going to go." I was pleading with her to remain, but he continued urging her to go. She continued looking between us as if trying to figure out what was actually happening, so I guess I looked scared. When he saw that I was afraid, he burst out laughing. He said I was being silly and asked if I was scared of him. He asked his girlfriend whether she believed that I should be terrified of him for any reason. She informed him he was acting strangely and had a frightened expression. He went on to say that I had just informed him that I was being a terrible cunt about little matters and that I was leaving him as a roommate. This time, his girlfriend complied with his request to depart, although she appeared hesitant. I interpreted it as a show of encouragement when she gave me a short grip on the hand before leaving. After she left, he began to lose his mind. He said that I was just upset because he wouldn't allow me to act like the big slut that I want. He said that even if I would eventually meet the right man, he wouldn't want to date me since I would have slept with so many men. Furthermore, no respectable person wishes to wed a skank. He claimed to be attempting to steer me clear of such circumstance. I was so stunned that I could hardly talk. Throughout my life, I have had precisely 3 sexual partners, all of whom were in committed partnerships. Nobody would consider me promiscuous, and even if I were, it wouldn't matter to him. I informed him that I would be giving our landlord notice on Monday, and that we could speak again when he was ready to do so without uttering hurtful things to me. I shut my door after entering my room and retrieving my emergency kit, which I had prepared in advance. In the hopes that he would settle down or go, I waited for 5 minutes or so. I made my way to the front door as soon as I felt safe. He came up behind me and called my name as I was almost there. He smacked me squarely in the face as I swiftly spun around. It completely caught me off guard. He stepped over me and walked away without saying anything else when I fell to the ground. I left without even slamming the door, acting as though he hadn't just attacked me. I sat in utter disbelief for a long time. I had never been struck by my brother before. Growing up, we'd argued a lot, but it had never resulted in violence. He had always taken care to avoid hurting me even when we were youngsters, wrestling and roughhousing. This came as a complete surprise. I put some ice on my eye. Before taking my luggage and leaving, it's purple and bloated now. I feared that he might return, and I didn't want to be present when he did. As I was making my way to my car, I contacted my mother, so she would be informed if he came up to me. Even after I emailed her a photo of my face, she insisted that I was exaggerating. She then broke down in tears and said she was sorry she didn't believe me. I assured her that everything was all right, but I made it plain that I would never again be pushed to spend time with him at family events. Since then, I've been living with my new roommate. She has impressed me with the details, gave me her sofa, and helped me acquire some basic necessities because most of my stuff is still at the apartment. She has been really lovely about the whole situation. I'm not prepared to divulge. I have not replied to any of the SMS that my brother has sent me. Here are some examples. You went where you're gone now that I've returned home. We need to wrap up our discussion on this. Are you seriously joking with me? Tell me that you are alive and where you are. The fact that I haven't heard from you worries me. You are aware of my concern when you disappear in this manner. Right now, you're acting like such a child. Mom is extremely furious with you. I'm not sure what you said to her. I hope all is well with you. On Monday, I'll be at home all day. If you would like to meet with the landlord to provide notice, please do so. It's okay. Where do I intend to reside? At one point, his girlfriend even contacted me to express his concern for me. Yes, exactly. I'm not sure if she really thinks he's worried or if he set her up for it. I'm frightened of involving her in this mess, but I kind of want to tell her what happened. I'm anxious about tomorrow a lot. I haven't informed him if I plan to speak with the landlord. In order for him to see what he'd done to my face, my new roommate recommended that I not wear any makeup and stated she would accompany me. I'm at a loss on what to do. Edit. I've made the decision to make a report at the police station in a few days with my roommate after reading your remarks. In addition, I'm attempting to get in touch with his girlfriend to inform her about the situation. I haven't even spoken to my brother. I'm also considering giving my dad a call. He doesn't play a big role in my life, but I would appreciate some family support because my mom hasn't been supportive. Update. I'm amazed at how helpful everyone has been. You are all correct. I have to report this. My roommate and I went to the police station and made a report last night. I informed them about my brother's strange experiences over the last year. I told them that his girlfriend saw my text exchange with my mother and that she had watched our quarrel. The audio recording I had made during our altercation was also played for them. My face seems worse in the photos they took than it did in the one I texted my mother. The swelling has increased, and it has taken on a terrible yellowish-purple hue. I didn't ask many questions since I was anxious and overwhelmed. I had never filed a police report before, and the entire procedure was frightening. They promised to contact me today and handed me a copy of the report. I'm not sure if he will be arrested or not. They didn't provide that information either, and I feel foolish for not asking such a simple question. When I decide out where I'm going to put things, I might take advantage of their offer to be escorted to the apartment to get my items if necessary. While I was in the police station, his girlfriend called. After that, I texted her and we had a phone conversation. She continued apologizing when I told her what had happened after she departed. I inquired if he had ever done anything like that to her and reassured her that it wasn't her fault. I hope she was being truthful when she answered no. I just stated that I wanted her to know for her own protection without bringing up the subject of calling the police. She apologized more and thanked me. I assured her I would check in to see how she was doing, but she didn't specify what she planned to do. But she did tell me something fascinating. My brother apparently showed her photos of me and talked about me all the time when they initially started dating. She said that the extent to which he seemed to worship me unnerved her, but she assumed that this was simply a result of our close sibling relationship. She also supported my suspicions, saying that she had thought it strange that we looked same. She said that on one occasion, while they were shopping, he chose clothes for her that she later discovered were exact replicas of what I possessed. Unsettling. I gave my dad a call this morning. Since Father's Day, we haven't spoken. His new family usually takes precedence over us, and he is remarried with younger children. To my surprise, he showed more sympathy than I had anticipated. He said that my brother's aggressive inclinations at school around the time of the divorce were evident from his conduct as a youngster. But no one ever disclosed this to me. He was not surprised at all. Although my brother had occasionally harmed other children and even murdered a neighbor's cat, my mother always defended him and downplayed the severity of his actions. Dad acknowledged that he ought to have been more active in our lives, or at the very least battled harder for custody. I could also sense that he felt bad. Dad, who is rather wealthy, promised to hire me a lawyer. In any case, he suggested consulting with one to obtain expert guidance on the next course of action. I agreed to meet with a lawyer tomorrow after work to accept his offer. My mother is unable to assist my brother financially, and he is unable to pay for a lawyer. Thus, I have an edge because of this. Dad also said he would give me money if I had to end the lease and move right away. I'm thinking about it. I appreciate everyone's encouragement to call the police. I haven't been in touch with my brother yet, and I won't until I've had a consultation with a lawyer. My mother texted me to inquire as to why I haven't been communicating with my brother. Neither have I answered those. She made a couple calls as well, but I ignored them and left them on voicemail. She frequently uses phrases like, "He's your brother," "Family is family," and "You two need to work this out" in her texts. She seemed to be utterly disregarding the fact that he struck me in the face. I'm not sure what will happen next, but I'll keep you informed if anything noteworthy occurs. I'm now simply trying to make sense of things and determine what a typical brother-sister relationship should entail, as I don't seem to know. Once again, I want to thank everyone for their wisdom and support. I was wondering if I was overreacting before I posted this. I see now that I wasn't reacting aggressively enough, if anything.